I believe you're in the wrong place." The voice sliced through the warm afternoon air like a blade sharp cold and unmistakably condescending. The golden Pacific sunlight dimmed beneath the shadow of a woman standing tall like a drawn sword. Her white silk dress danced in the breeze, but her gaze, icy and elevated, pierced through Julian Hayes like he was a stray creature that had wandered into paradise. Julian didn't look up. He calmly folded the corner of his copy of Meditations by Marcus Aurelius. Slowly. A small act, but one full of control. His steady, dark-skinned hands stood out against the soft, cream-colored towels, an image so out of place that it seemed almost surreal. The sound of water lapping against the pool's edge faded. A child's laughter died mid-giggle. A mother gently pulled her son away, whispering something about a stranger. The soft flipping of magazines, the squirt of sunscreen bottles, everything halted. No one spoke, but their stares screamed. Eleanor Vance wasn't angry. She wasn't loud. She was marble smooth, cold, immovable. In her hand wasn't a clipboard, but an iPad Pro displaying the Serafina Community Charter. Her long, elegant finger tapped the screen click. The sound echoed like a gavel striking wood. Security guard Kevin took a step back, sweat forming across his brow. His eyes darted between Julian and Eleanor, then dropped to the ground as if he were witnessing an execution. In his head, a silent plea looped on repeat. "Please don't do this. Don't do this." "I live here," Julian said, his voice low, calm, unwavering. Eleanor laughed, a soft, cutting sound. "Live here where?" "In the staff quarters." Before Julian could reply, another voice interrupted, lower, more arrogant. "What's all this fuss about on such a lovely afternoon?" Eleanor Richard Sterling had arrived. Ralph Lauren polo shirt, cream golf pants, a whiskey glass in hand with 2 melting cubes of ice. His silver hair was slicked back, gold-rimmed sunglasses resting on his face. He didn't project the sharp edge Eleanor did, but his stare carried layers of frozen contempt. Eleanor tilted her head. "An unusual situation. I believe someone who isn't a resident is using our exclusive facilities." "Ah." Richard stepped closer, eyes scanning Julian from head to toe like he was assessing a used car. "Young man, do you realize the monthly service fee here could buy you a used Lexus? This place isn't for people looking to experience. It's for those who've earned it." Julian remained seated. Hands on his knees, he exhaled slowly, eyes still closed. "And people like you," Richard leaned in, whispering just loud enough for the others to hear, "think they can take everything. This view, this peace, you're stealing it." That word stealing dropped like a sentence, as if Julian were a thief not for what he'd done but for simply existing. At last Julian opened his eyes. They held no rage, no rebuttal, only a depth of exhaustion so sharp it cut. A silent, steel-cold gaze that pierced every layer of unspoken bias wrapped around him. No one laughed now. No one dared. Not because they suddenly understood, but because something in that look unsettled them more than any argument could. A man who didn't need to shout to be heard. A man who knew the weight of silence and chose to wield it. A soft breeze flipped the page of Marcus Aurelius. A line flashed briefly. "If you are distressed by anything external, the pain is not due to the thing itself, but to your estimate of it." Julian looked directly at Richard Sterling. "I don't need to steal anything. I've paid for it. With my life." Eleanor blinked. Richard froze. Kevin stopped breathing. The crowd stood like statues. Julian stood up, not rushed. Every movement a declaration: he would not bow, he would not flee. He walked over to the small table beside his lounge chair and picked up his phone from beneath the towel. Raised his head again, this time at all of them. No accusation, no curse. just a look that made them question themselves. No explosion, no declaration, just absolute silence. And in that silence you could almost hear it, the faint first cracks forming in the walls of prejudice. I think the community Facebook group needs to know about this security issue. Eleanor Vance spoke as if she were fulfilling a noble duty, not drowning a man in the chlorinated waters of privilege. Her voice rang out with rehearsed clarity, each word deliberate like she'd practiced this moment 100 times in front of a mirror. Eleanor Vance reporting live from the Azure Club about an intruder. She raised her phone and began live streaming. Her face in the frame was glowing with a forced radiance. The voice pure Karen spread across thousands of screens within seconds, cloaked in the righteousness of self-appointed order. The crowd was no longer silent. A few nodded along as if to excuse themselves. I didn't start this. I'm just agreeing with the live stream. Others began recording on their phones not out of concern for truth, but for fear of missing a viral moment. An Asian family quietly packed up and left. The mother avoided Julian's gaze. The father looked back for just 1 second, his eyes full of sadness and helplessness. Not our business, they told themselves. Julian said nothing. He opened his phone fingers, calmly gliding across the screen. Eleanor narrowed her eyes. Calling a lawyer, good luck. There are cameras all over this place. Everything's been recorded. Julian made the call. His voice, when it came, stood in stark contrast to the chaos around him, calm, measured, almost serene. Sarah, activate Protocol Veritas. Initiate full data capture and archive. He hung up. Eleanor squinted. Protocol what? Don't try to scare me with your tricks. Julian turned and looked her in the eye. It's an internal protocol. It ensures the truth is recorded indisputably. Something shifted in the air. A few whispers spread through the crowd. A middle-aged man muttered Veritas. That sounds familiar. Richard Sterling stepped forward with a dry chuckle. Truth, huh? Interesting how someone from the outside talks about truth like he owns it. Julian stared at him without blinking. Then he made a second call, this time on speaker. David speaking, came the sharp professional voice. David, I need you to run a real-time asset analysis on Sterling Development. Focus on loans and guarantees tied to the Hayes Foundation. Richard froze. Motion around the pool stopped as if someone had paused time itself. Hayes Foundation. Eleanor repeated as though saying a forbidden phrase. The name was familiar, but no one had connected it to the man standing before them. Richard tried to laugh, but it came out cracked and brittle. Julian ended the call. Policy matters, doesn't it, Mr. Sterling, he said. Especially Clause 8.2.1. Appendix D regarding conduct by board members in public spaces. Richard said nothing. He was calculating. But for the first time that afternoon, he found no way forward. Kevin, the security guard, swallowed hard. His hand still clutched his radio, but he no longer knew whose orders to follow. Eleanor's eyes darted, her breath quickening. The cameras weren't just on Julian anymore, they were turning on her. Comments rolled in on the live stream. Wait, who is he? Didn't I hear that name Hayes on a TED Talk last year? Someone Google it. Julian didn't need fury to bring them down. He was doing it with the one thing they never prepared for: truth. Eleanor still tried to push back. It doesn't matter who you are. Rules are rules. This community has policies, and no one is above them. Julian turned to the camera on her live stream. Then let's show everyone the full process of how this suspect is handled today. No cuts, no edits, no lies. If you believe in rules, then let justice unfold in front of the public. Silence. But not the same kind as before. This was heavier. No one was laughing. No one was live streaming for fun anymore. Phones were still recording, but now they were capturing evidence. Julian glanced at Kevin. His eyes held no blame, just a silent question. Which side will you stand on? Kevin looked around, his hands trembling. His radio crackled. The dispatcher's voice, Kevin's status update. Name of the subject. Kevin looked at Julian. The man hadn't given his name until now. Julian nodded. Tell him it's Julian Hayes. One dead silent beat on the radio. Then, oh fuck. The curse echoed loud enough for everyone at the pool to hear. Every eye turned to Eleanor. Her live stream was no longer a weapon. It was a verdict. Kevin's radio crackled. Then came the urgent voice of the head of security. Kevin confirmed the subject's name. What did you say it was? Kevin hesitated. His eyes scanned Julian's face, steady, unreadable, like the surface of still water before a storm. He hasn't said his name. Julian spoke up, his voice calm and precise, as if the words had been rehearsed long ago. Tell him it's Julian Hayes. Silence. Not the silence of confusion, but of recognition. Then from the radio came a curse, raw and unfiltered, oh fuck. A woman nearby holding her phone up to Eleanor's live stream froze mid-recording. Her fingers trembled as she quickly switched to Google and typed Julian Hayes Apex. The results loaded instantly. Julian Hayes, founder and CEO of Apex Innovations. Net worth $12.3 billion. Founder of the Hayes Foundation, the largest investment and philanthropic fund on the West Coast. Eleanor's face turned ghostly pale. She blinked rapidly, as if trying to reject what was now undeniably true. The atmosphere around the pool shifted. The giggles of children vanished. The sound of waves lapping against the tile echoed unnaturally loudly. Somewhere a glass slipped and shattered. A young woman in the crowd leaned toward her husband and whispered, "Isn't he the one who donated $50 million to UCLA Hospital last year? He's the reason this city even has a STEM scholarship program for Black students." The whispers spread. Phones buzzed and screens lit up, but now every camera was turned back toward Eleanor, no longer a guardian of community values, but the face of ignorance and arrogance. Eleanor muttered under her breath, almost a plea. This can't be happening. But it was. And it was real. Richard Sterling still stood nearby, but his expression had changed completely. No more smugness. No superiority, only calculation. He looked at Julian the way a predator realizes it's just cornered something far stronger than itself. Julian's phone rang. He answered on speaker. Sarah here, came a crisp female voice, clearly an executive assistant. Mr. Hayes, the CEO of the building's management firm, is en route. He sends his deepest apologies for the unwelcoming environment at the Serafina Grand. The board is awaiting your directive. The phrase "awaiting your directive" was the final blade through every remaining doubt. Kevin stepped back. Eleanor whispered, barely audible, You don't just live here." Julian didn't respond. He reached into the pocket of his swim shorts and pulled out a small object, not a standard residence keycard. It was a matte black card made of carbon fiber inlaid with a single platinum H engraved in the center. No building logo. No QR code. None needed. He placed the card on the table nearby. Click. A soft sound, but it rang out like the slam of a coffin lid. Julian stood tall, his gaze sweeping across the crowd. His voice wasn't loud or harsh, it was low, almost mournful. I built this place as a sanctuary, a quiet place for people to simply be. He paused. His eyes moved from face to face, not accusing, just disappointed. But today, you turned it into a courtroom. Eleanor stepped back. Richard's hand clenched around his whiskey glass, his jaw twitching with tension. A little girl, no older than 7, whispered to her mother, "Mommy, is that man the owner here?" The mother squeezed her daughter's hand and looked down, unable to meet Julian's eyes. The crowd was no longer just ashamed. They were questioning themselves, partly because of the power that had just been revealed, but mostly because they had reacted as if he were a thing, not a person. Julian walked away from the pool. No one stopped him. No one apologized. Not a word was spoken. Only the eyes followed him, eyes that for the first time that day saw him as a human being. And in those eyes, for the first time, there was fear. But not fear of Julian Hayes. It was fear of themselves, of realizing they had laughed, filmed, nodded, while a man was humiliated for nothing more than his skin and his silence. Richard Sterling collapsed into a chair. His whiskey glass slipped from his hand, shattered across the stone tiles. No one picked it up. No one offered comfort. His phone buzzed. A call from the investment bank. Once Richard would have let it ring because powerful men made others wait. But this time he lunged for it. "Hello." The voice on the other end was flat, emotionless, yet every word landed like a blow. "Richard, the $50 million loan for your coastal resort development. The primary guarantor, a subsidiary of the Hayes Foundation, has officially withdrawn its backing. Without it, the bank is freezing disbursement. Our apologies." Richard said nothing. He stared into space as though he'd just been handed a death sentence. No need for Julian to shout. No police were called. One well-timed phone call, and the entire foundation of Richard's wealth collapsed. Not canceled, not fired from the board, uprooted. Eleanor Vance's live stream was still rolling now with over 56,000 viewers, and the comments poured in like a flood. Her husband's a partner at Greystone and March, sending them the link now. Does St. Bellamy Prep know how this parent treats black residents? Screenshot everything. Her full name is Eleanor Whitaker Vance. Eleanor stared at her phone, hands trembling. Messages from board members flooded her screen. "Eleanor, take the video down now. We need an emergency meeting. Urgent. We're asking for your immediate resignation. Avoid further damage." Everything she'd built her image as a modern lady of class, a community guardian, a refined wife of influence, was now being devoured by the one thing she thought she controlled: unfiltered truth. No one needed to take her down. The very network she prided herself on, schools, parent councils, legal circles, became the sharpest blade against her. Eleanor's downfall didn't come from above. It came from every direction. By the pool's edge, Kevin still stood unable to lift his eyes. His radio hissed to life. "Kevin, you're suspended, effective immediately. Surrender your badge and vacate post. Report to the management office by 5 p.m. Kevin bit his lip. His face went pale. He reached for the radio, hands shaking. But before he could remove his badge, Julian raised a hand and stepped forward. He took the radio, pressed the button, and spoke directly into it. "This is Julian Hayes. I'd like to speak with whoever gave that order." Silence. Then a stammering voice responded, "Yes. Yes, sir. This is Clark, head of security." "Clark, I don't want Kevin fired." Julian's voice was steady, firm, but not soft. "I want him in my office Monday morning at 9. Not for punishment, for a conversation." Silence again. Then, "Understood, Mr. Hayes. And I want your company to fully fund mandatory training, bias awareness, and de-escalation strategies for every employee. The Hayes Foundation will design and oversee the program. No pushback this time." "Yes, sir." Julian lowered the radio and turned to Kevin. He didn't scold him. Didn't ask. "Why didn't you speak up?" Didn't list grievances. He simply placed a hand on the guard's shoulder, who was on the verge of tears, and said, "We all get it wrong sometimes. What matters is what we choose to learn from it." Kevin bowed his head, unable to hold back tears. He whispered, "Thank you." Mr. Hayes. Julian turned back to the crowd, now frozen in silence. No more live streams. No more snickering. No more raised brows or smug glances. He looked into them, his voice not raised, but echoing in every chest. Today you didn't attack a billionaire. You attacked a black man reading a book. He paused, letting the words settle in their skin. The only reason you feel shame instead of pride is because I happen to be a billionaire. Silence. No applause. No arguments. Just a crowd facing a truth too heavy to deny. Julian walked away. No security needed. No one dared stop him. His back is straight. His stride is steady. He didn't win through power, he led with purpose. 1 week later. No splashing water. No live streams. No judgmental eyes squinting beneath the afternoon sun. The community hall of the Serafina Grand, once reserved for cocktail parties and investor briefings, had been completely rearranged. Chairs lined up in neat rows, the microphone system double-checked, and every resident in attendance. Today's meeting wasn't optional. Julian Hayes stood at the podium. No suit, no emblems of power. Just a pale, sand-colored shirt, simple trousers, and a voice forged from thousands of confrontations with the world. I won't rehash what happened. He began scanning the room. Not because I want you to forget, but because I want us to focus on what matters more, what must change. Behind him, the LED screen displayed the Hayes Foundation logo alongside the words, "The Serafina Charter," a manifesto on dignity and community. Julian lowered his gaze and read aloud the core points, not like a CEO issuing directives, but like a man laying the foundation of a new culture. All residents and staff at the Serafina Grand are required to attend regular workshops on inclusion, unconscious bias, and community response. An anonymous reporting system monitored by a third-party watchdog will be implemented to address all incidents of discrimination, harassment, or abuse of authority. A Serafina Community Fund will be established, financed entirely by penalties for policy violations, dedicated to supporting education programs for underprivileged youth across Los Angeles. No objections. No skeptical glances. Because everyone in that room knew these weren't just rules. They were a mirror of what they once were, and a contract for what they were expected to become. Julian looked around once more, his voice deepening. The old standard was, if you stayed silent, you were safe. The new standard is, if you stand up when it matters, you've earned the right to be part of this community. A private room. No cameras. No audience. Kevin sat across from Julian, no longer in uniform. His eyes were red, sleepless for a week. I don't have the words to apologize. Julian shook his head. I don't need an apology. I need you to understand something. He leaned back, gaze firm but not angry. Your mistake doesn't define who you are. How you learn from it does. Kevin nodded hard. He didn't try to justify, didn't beg for forgiveness. He simply listened like a man ready to rebuild himself from the wreckage. Julian rose, placed a hand on his shoulder. Monday we start, at the Hayes Foundation office. Late that afternoon. The Azure Club was quiet, as always, but something had changed. On the wall where a sign once read, "No pets, no running children, no uninvited guests," now hung a simple brass plaque. Etched into it, dignity is the first amenity. The Serafina Charter. Julian sat on the same lounge chair as before. No crowds, no phones, just him and a new book in hand, The Souls of Black Folk by W.E.B. Du Bois. The glass door opened. A family entered, a black father holding his young daughter, his wife, with a pool towel draped over her shoulder. They paused, hesitation still flickering in their eyes. An older woman nearby, Mrs. Martinez, a longtime resident who had stayed silent the week before, offered a soft smile and a nod. Welcome. Water's nice today. The little girl smiled. The father nodded gratefully. They walked toward the pool without needing an invitation. No more lines, no more stairs. Just a community learning to begin again. The camera slowly pulls back. The sound of waves in the distance. Sunset settling like a warm blanket over the coast. And in that frame, a story ends. Not in triumph, but with a new standard. A world where dignity and communal responsibility are no longer virtues. They're the minimum price of being called civilized. Sometimes justice doesn't need a gun or a courtroom, just someone who stands tall when everyone else bows their head. If this story moved, you subscribe to Story Precious to help us keep spreading what's right. Because the right story told at the right time to the right people can change an entire community.